If you're a vendor, especially a small one, go and reach out to them. Just, like I said, you don't have to be a client to do a briefing, to show your company, introduce your company to a Forrester analyst at least.
Hmm.
No charge to do that. It's up to the analyst to decide if they have the time. And
Mhm.
and some of that depends on their research calendar. So dovetail into that. If you're a vendor, you probably have data and you talk to customers too. You have some insights into the marketplace.
Mhm.
Try to contribute, try to help that analyst do research.
Welcome to Unspoken Security, the raw and gritty podcast for security professionals who are looking to understand the most important issues related to making the world a safer place, including intelligence-driven security, risks and threats in the digital and physical world, and discussions related to corporate culture, leadership, and how world events impact all of us on and off our keyboards. In each episode, host AJ Nash engages with a range of industry experts to dissect current trends, share practical insights, and address the blunt truths surrounding all aspects of the security industry.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unspoken Security. I'm your host, AJ Nash. I spent 19 years in the intelligence community, mostly at NSA, and I've been building and maturing intelligence programs in the private sector for almost 9 years now, I suppose. I'm passionate about intelligence, security, public speaking, mentoring, and teaching. I also have a master's degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University, Go Zags, and I continue to be deeply committed to servant leadership. This podcast brings all of these elements together with some incredible guests to have authentic, unfiltered conversations on a wide range of challenging topics. This is not your typical polished podcast. My dog makes occasional appearances. She is, in fact, sleeping right next to me today. So if anybody comes to the door, the wind blows funny, you might all get to meet her again. That's just how it works, though. So the point here, though, is that people argue, we debate, we even swear here. I promise I will be doing some swearing, and that's all okay. Think of this podcast as a conversation you'd overhear at a bar after a long day at one of the larger cybersecurity conferences. These are the conversations we usually have when nobody's listening. Now, admittedly, my dog doesn't go to those usually. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Brian Kime. He's an intelligence professional, served 20 years combined active and reserve service in the U.S. Army. He's been in cyber threat intelligence for over a decade across many industries, including critical infrastructure, finance, and manufacturing. He's worked in multiple cybersecurity vendors. And the topic of this episode, the reason we're going to tell you what it is in a second, but he was also an industry analyst at Forrester, leading the research on threat intelligence, vulnerability management, and ICS OT security vendors and their best practices. Brian, is there anything about your long and distinguished profile that I left out?
Well, it's right here on my hoodie. I'm a Ramblin' Rep from Georgia Tech. Did my bachelor's there. I got a couple master's degrees too, but I don't have any hoodies from those schools. And I see you're repping your local big research university there too. So
that's right, University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. Now, Brian didn't mention, if you're going to say this, like Brian went to Georgia Tech, what he didn't mention is his degree is in architecture.
Yeah,
which is pretty interesting if you think about it. We just talked about the background here, and I've worked with Brian, by the way. We worked together. We've known each other prior to that, but we have worked together. I've yet to see Brian design any buildings, maybe he's got some. He and some famous architects I'm unaware of, but to my knowledge, he doesn't design buildings. But he's a damn smart guy. Maybe we'll talk about that. That's not part of today's discussion, but actually, I should have thrown it in someplace to talk about architecture. Actually, today, what we're going to talk about, the topic is, isn't it just pay to play? It's about working with industry analysts. And as you mentioned, and as we talked about in the opening, Brian did spend time working at Forrester. It's actually where we originally crossed paths. I've been in the industry for a while, which means you run into everybody eventually. And so, listen, let's jump right into this one, Ben. So when we talk about industry analysts, like first thing, like setting the stage for those who aren't familiar with the topic, who are we actually talking about? Like what industry analysts, what organizations, and a little bit about what they do.
yeah, you're talking about companies like Forrester, where I obviously worked, and there's tons of other firms. There's the biggest one, Gartner, which pretty much everyone is familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
There's smaller firms like IDC and Frost and Sullivan. There's a lot of firms that focus on a particular technology area, where the bigger folks like Gartner and Forrester have research teams across many different personas. And so I was on the security and risk team at Forrester. And so obviously we served security and risk professionals. So mostly CISOs, but your enterprise risk managers and so forth. Anyone that was in that kind of security space.
Okay, that makes sense. And I want to get into a little more detail on this one a little further down. But so, I mean, in the high level, like I've seen some of these, right? Like Gartner has the Wave or something like that, right? And Forrester does, I don't know, what do you guys do? A shiny pickle or
Actually,
a
it's
star?
actually Forrester does the Wave,
That's what. See, that's the issue. That's I got to
and
understand this, right?
Gartner has the Magic Quadrant. Those are the
Magic Quadrant, right?
two
That's right.
biggest ones, and every one of firm has their own type of vendor evaluation with a name, and typically the result is vendors want to be up and to the right. That's the main goal, really, of vendors that are selected from one of those research reports. But they don't just analyze and report on vendors. They do a lot of best practices.
Okay.
So at Forrester, the biggest thing, at least from the security and risk team that folks would be familiar with, is zero trust.
Oh yeah.
About 2009, 2010, predecessor of mine there, John Kindervag, started talking about concept of zero trust, how networks should not be trusted regardless of where you are.
Wait a minute. Are you saying John Kindervag invented the term zero trust?
I believe he takes credit for it. I'm sure someone else out there would say like, no, it was so and so, or maybe they would
Well,
raise
there's
their hand
always some of
and
that. Yeah. Yeah.
say it was them
Hmm.
themselves. But
Interesting.
that evolved obviously into various products and services amongst cybersecurity companies. You now have the White House has a zero trust strategy. DoD now has a zero trust strategy. Each military branch, the Air Force, where you were, someone
Mm-hmm.
showed me the other day the Air Force, Department of the Air Force zero trust strategy. And I
Mm-hmm.
hear it down in corporate areas there. So my last employer, they were talking about doing zero trust, and Google even they've done zero trust. If you've heard the term Beyond Corp, that's Google's implementation
Okay.
of
All
zero
right.
trust
All right.
strategies. So zero trust is a big thing at Forrester. It still is to this day. They
Hmm.
continue to do research on it. That's way more than just network, obviously now, but that's one of the bigger things that they've done there.
Interesting. I'm as you're talking, I'm over here googling. John Kindervag really is like universally apparently accepted as having coined the term zero
Hmm.
trust. So,
Yep.
oh, that's a feather in the cap of Forrester research, apparently. Do you want to, like, briefly for those who don't know, like, because that's kind of a big deal. So, you talk about vendors and what they do. I mean, in this case, John's words under Forrester kind of changed the industry, right? What's zero trust? I know we're not going to have that discussion today. It's not the big topic, but for those who are wondering, like, I mean, zero trust sounds like a good dating strategy, but like, what is it? I'm just saying, especially for some people I know. But what I mean, so he coined the phrase, I assume, because he was working. Was he working with others when he did this, or is this something that these vendors do? Or not vendors, these analyst organizations do their own research and just come up with their own concepts as well? Was this separate from working with other orgs? And like, what did he invent basically?
That was quite a long
Yeah,
question there.
get
So
down.
let's break it down a little bit. Let's define zero trust real quick. Zero trust basically is on the network side, it's all networks are untrusted. So it doesn't matter internal network, the hotel Wi-Fi, your Starbucks, your home network,
Hmm.
whatever it is. When we were all like in offices, you used to just trust the enterprise network. You plugged in,
Mm-hmm.
boom, you're on, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you got physical access to the building, you plugged it in, it's all good to go. Now we don't want to even trust the local network, right? Because I can sniff packets, I can sniff PII and PHI coming over the network. And when I'm in the office, VPNs are great, but VPNs can be vulnerabilities themselves. So one of the key points from the White House strategy actually is to authenticate to applications, not to networks.
Hmm.
So it's flipping that a little bit. Where do we authenticate to? And conditional, like risk-based authentication, dovetails on that. So new devices, new locations, whatever, you may get prompted for more multi-factor authentication prompts. MFA is absolutely part of a good zero trust strategy. You get into segmenting networks there. So traditionally, you kind of just monitored the perimeter of your network.
Mm-hmm.
Now we encourage monitoring inside the perimeter, controlling what a lot of folks on the network side call east-west traffic. So through your network, not necessarily to the internet.
Hmm.
And with that monitoring, you then start to segment your network. So an R&D lab kind of gets its own VLAN or firewalled off from maybe production spaces. Accountants don't necessarily talk to ops or programmers or whatever. So you start to segment networks down. You segment identity. So if you're a cloud admin, you should have a specific identity to perform those admin actions. Anything on-prem, unique credentials everywhere. So when one credential gets compromised, which it will eventually, it doesn't lead to a catastrophic takeover, a catastrophic ransomware, right, of your network. So it's a lot about microsegmenting identities, data, networks, workloads, and everything. It's to help you build resilience, recover easier, limit the damage from a breach, because we're all going to get breached, of course. And zero trust is a good way to limit the damage, to recover quicker.
So it sounds
out of the news, really, out of the breach news.
Yeah. So it sort of sounds like, I'm a dummy, so I'm gonna break it down in simple terms. The before times, right, when we were all in the office space, like that's sort of like, to compare it to, say, international travel. You get to the U.S. border, they check your passport, then you're in. Then you can go anywhere you want in the States. You're trusted to be in the States, basically, right? Zero trust would be like if every state you went to, they had to check your paperwork again, or every city. It's like check and check and check, right? And so, if they're checkpoints all the way through, but it's technical and digital and not as overt as somebody at the gate saying, "May I see your papers, please?" But I mean, that's what it sounds like, right? That's the way you're describing it. By the way, for those listening or watching who are pedantic, like me, frankly, apparently John can argue with Stephen Paul Marsh, apparently invented the term zero trust in 1994 as part of a doctoral thesis. Yes, the internet's wonderful like that.
I knew there was someone out there that would argue.
Yeah, 1994, best Stephen Paul Marsh. But then John Kindervag still is credited with putting it more in this context in 2010, and then now it's really taken off.
But I'll give you a better metaphor, actually. That's a little more appropriate.
Sure, show me up. Give me a better metaphor, Brian. Go for it.
You spent plenty of time at Fort Meade. I spent plenty of time at Fort Gordon, now known as Fort Eisenhower. And just to get through that main gate, think about like that main fence. You've got a couple places to get in. They check IDs, but there's not a whole lot of scrutiny there, right? It's easy to get a guest pass.
That's
get
true.
on post, right? But then you get in there, and then certain buildings, have higher levels of security. Buildings that we used to work in, and you may have a different badge, a different ID to get in there.
There's a secret handshake at the agency for those who don't know.
Little fist bump,
Yeah, it was a little song, but a little Macarena kind of thing, Yeah, go ahead, friend.
Right. And even then, once you're in the buildings, then there's other segments. This badge gets you into this door, and it doesn't get you into that one. And then you've got to get different tickets, if you will, to get in different places and all. And so everything's very segmented. So zero trust is a little bit, like that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. I know it's a little sidebar, but I thought it was interesting as you're going on the path, because we talked about these vendors or these, I keep saying vendors because I'm a vendor guy normally, the analysts, right? So, this is part of what happens though. Like John went and did research on this, and obviously, again, built off the shoulders of somebody else a little bit, maybe. I'm not trying to take away from John. That's awesome. But he's the one that coined the phrase in this context and really started talking about zero trust architectures. And I mean, that's a big contribution to the entire cybersecurity industry. So it's not just about, waves and magic quadrants and, getting ratings and awards and that kind of a thing. I'm sure it's some of it, but there's legitimate contributions independent of that back to the cybersecurity community. So, I mean, I think that's important to note, frankly, because I don't know that a lot of people know that. It doesn't come up much. I think a lot of people go, "Oh,
I wish I had a concept or a report that was as influential as zero trust."
Yeah. What did you write? Well, Wimmy, you were this. You did. Yeah. What did you write, man? Go ahead. Tell me what your version of zero trust is. What's the awesome thing you wrote for Forrester that changed the industry? No pressure. No pressure, man. Get on it.
I wish, but one of my predecessors, Rick Holland, was the first one to start really evaluating the threat intelligence space. He was an enlisted Army intel guy back in like the 90s. And he also helped create the SANS Cyber Threat Intel Summit, which continues to go on today. He's still a co-chair of that, along with Katie Nichols.
Yeah,
and
brilliant people.
He kind of started
on the show.
Yeah. So Rick kind of started that over there, and that term kind of became the overall kind of industry term for what you and I have spent a lot of our private sector careers doing. When I first got into what is now cyber threat intelligence,
Hmm.
I was an IT security intel analyst. Cyber wasn't even in there for one. And then my second role at SecureWorks, I was a cyber intelligence senior
Hmm.
manager. Threat was not even in there yet. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I was at Southern Company that threat and they all the words got put together. Cyber threat intel analyst
Hmm. Hmm.
finally got put together on one business card, and Rick is definitely partially responsible for that. But other things I wrote, one, I did the first full Forrester wave on threat intelligence. There was a lightweight wave years before, but I did the whole process with all the checks and editing and everything.
Hmm.
I also wrote a report called How to Operationalize Threat Intelligence in
Cool.
your
Oh
enterprise.
yeah, I read that one actually. I think that's
Um,
how I first met you. I think that's what I came across of originally was that one.
I'm glad somebody wrote it or read it rather.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And because a lot of the research, a lot of the vendors at that time and everything, it was IOC feeds and stuff,
Hmm.
and you had some of the APT fuzzy snuggy duck type reports and all, and the industry was still little immature. And I would like to think that it's matured a little bit. It's more valuable to enterprises than it's ever been. That I like to think that I played a small part in that and helping the field grow and professionalize.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Like it's yeah. It might have been that one or something. I don't remember exactly. I think it was that piece, but I think that's how we crossed paths. I'd been someplace else. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I think that's important that people know, like I said, that there's contributions here. I think a lot of people, not everybody, and we're gonna get into it in a minute, but I've been in plenty of companies where it's like, all right, well, all right, Gartner's coming or Forrester's coming. All right, do we are we gonna pay them? Like, how are we gonna get represented? Where are we gonna be in their quadrant or their wave or their shiny pickle or whatever their report's gonna be from this analyst group? And I think a lot of people I work with, think of them from that standpoint, which is, the evaluation portion and that piece matters, but I don't think everybody gathers that, hey, these are also legitimate professionals who go out and do research and write new things and change stuff. Rick Holland probably doesn't, I mean, Rick and I are friends, but probably don't love the fact that I've actually tried to reverse a lot of his shit. I don't believe cyber threat intelligence is the right term, and I've hammered that for years. Threat is a subset of intel. It shouldn't be its own damn thing. I've pushed the other direction to cyber intel, and I've actually pushed further and down said, just call it intel. It's all intel. Just stop trying to segment it out. These are subsets. It's
On
intel.
that note, I didn't write a report about this, but I had vendors that came to me for advisory, and they
Hmm.
wanted help like understanding intelligence, threat intelligence, cyber intelligence versus other
Yep.
things.
Yep.
So, and in the business world, what I discovered there's like business intelligence and
Right.
consumer intelligence, market intelligence, competitive intelligence,
Hmm.
location intelligence. There are tons of different things in the business world that co-opted that term intelligence. And for you and I and
Yep.
folks that came up through government and military intelligence, it's probably a little bit confusing. And we took that and we said, oh, well, this cyber thing, that's definitely intelligence. And I think we're
Hmm.
correct. But what a lot of the other folks did is I think this is like a post 9/11 kind of thing where intelligence just became more accessible to the layperson,
Yep.
that a lot of business people co-opted that term and said, well, instead of just data analysis, now it's business intelligence,
Yep. I
you
think so
know?
too.
And what I told folks in the vendor space was all those things kind of at their core are doing some of the same things. They're trying to improve decision making, use the data to develop some insights. Sometimes it's about consumers, sometimes about
Hmm.
competitors.
Hmm.
The difference between what you and I have done and what we do for CISOs and other security leaders is there's risks and threats here. And I don't know about you, but my job description as an Army intel officer always started with reduce risk and uncertainty
Sure.
to the command, the unit, the team, the whatever.
Yep.
And that's where the difference is in cyber intelligence, threat intelligence, whatever
Yeah.
term
Yeah.
you want to use. We're there to help folks make better decisions so that we don't have breaches, or if there is a breach, that we identify it and contain it and eradicate that threat quicker than we would have otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I said, I know you've said it too. Get the right people, the right context, the right time to make the right decision, or at least the most informed decision. Like I
Yeah.
can't guarantee they'll make the right decision. Right is very subjective, but yeah, I mean that's how it works. And in terms of that, business intelligence, that is kind of their goal as well a lot of times. And competitive intelligence, I mean, some of it's in there, I guess, right? And that's why I've been saying, listen, this is all intel. But I'm with you. Like, there was a point where it was so bastardized as a term. I remember getting frustrated about it. I used to, talk to people about all these things. I said, everything's intelligence, network intelligence, and this and that. I said, I'm pretty sure my dry cleaner is a dry cleaner intelligence analyst now. Or it's just everywhere, right? It just became a thing, and it frustrated me when I first got in the private sector because I was like, intelligence means something. There's a real word to this. There's a definition. There's a meaning. And that's what led to an opportunity and how I started talking more about this stuff publicly, and why I ended up gravitating towards people like you and others who come out of the industry and said, hey, how do we help private sector understand? If you're going to use this term, let's get it right. It makes you're going to water it down. And it's not going to make any sense anymore. This is all going to become just regurgitated news or information or whatever, and it's going to be very hard to explain to people later why this isn't intelligence and this is, and all these structures, right? And so I don't think Rick's wrong. I don't think you guys are wrong with cyber intelligence or cyber threat intelligence, whatever. I just said, hey, that's all a subset. Like, threat's a subset. Just, you're complicating things too much. Let's get everybody to understand what intelligence is, and then we'll just park everything underneath it as pillars. But we don't even have people understanding intelligence first, and they're just going to willy-nilly throw this everywhere. I'm like, and that's how you end up with people who are intelligence analysts in our industry, and you're like, nope, you're an incident responder, a really, really good one, but you're not an intelligence analyst. That's not what you do. That's just not it. And you go, God, it's hard to explain. And then anyway, I could go on that tangent, but I won't, because people are tired of that. So, all right, moving on in some of the core topics of our discussion on industry analysts. So we've I think hit pretty hard on, like, who are these people and what do they do, right? And even a little more than we thought. But in doing that, like, the topic is about pay for play. So what value do the industry analysts bring? Do these organizations bring? And as the opening says, is it just all pay for play? I mean, we already talked a little bit, we hinted because some of the other stuff that's written, but in terms of interactions between these advisory groups, these analysts and, vendors or potential customers of vendors, et cetera, what's the value that these folks bring, and, how does that work?
So the value that I brought to clients at Forrester, and those clients could be security vendors, all the big names you've heard of, could be startups, and lots of large enterprises, Fortune 500 companies, manufacturing companies, finance, you name it, you name the vertical, they probably subscribe to one of these firms. And our advice is research-based. It's neutral. I don't care really what industry you are in, who they are individually, whether they are private equity backed startup or venture backed, if they are a publicly traded security company, they're going to get the research backed advice from Forrester and from me personally. And I owned those three topics: threat intelligence, vulnerability management, and ICS/OT security. And so my view on the industry and the vendors there, that was like the singular voice at Forrester for those things. So everyone got basically the same advice. For threat intelligence, you should really have a threat intel team if you're like a Fortune 500 company, right?
Yes.
If you want to stay out of the breach news, it's one thing just to stick firewalls and EDR in there, but you can't defend against every threat out there, and not every threat sees you the same as a different target. So intel, I said to people, it's to help you be efficient with your security spending, with your staff. Should you be writing detections for every state nexus threat actor out there? If you are an accounting firm, maybe not. Maybe you have clients that are the targets of those state actors, and they're going to look to breach you to steal that information, that confidential financial information there.
Sure.
So, helping clients prioritize, spend efficiently, if their tech budgets are not, infinite. They have caps, and especially for security teams, most companies are incentivized to spend about as little on security as possible. So we helped enterprise clients make their vendor selection. They might ask me, Brian, here's my tech stack and here's my staffing. What intel vendor should I go with to maximize the value of all those things, of all those controls? and we talk through it. Maybe maybe they're mature enough to use your APT fuzzy snuggly duck type reporting and really design their security stack for a particular threat group that is known to target their industry. Well, maybe they just need an IOC feed they plug into the firewall and the EDR and just call it a day, right? So we, Forrester analysts and similar, help folks make procurement decisions.
So it's a consulting role. I mean, at least part of it sounds like it's some
We
consultative.
called it advisory because there actually is a consulting practice at Forrester, and all the consulting is based on Forrester research. So unlike a Big Four firm,
Yep.
and I'm not saying that their consulting has no research behind it, but all Forrester consulting, whether it was a longer term project to implement zero trust for an enterprise client, or it was some lead generation type of project for a SaaS vendor, was all backed by research. So I supported a consulting engagement that was creating basically a cyber threat intel maturity model. And now years later, Nicole
MMI.
Beckwith and Mike from Intel 471, Mike DeBolt and a bunch of other folks got together and they created another one. And I'm so happy to see that that there is something out there now. But yeah, I helped create that back in the day at Forrester. It was a bespoke thing for one client, and I don't believe it's even out there anymore. It was like one marketing campaign, and once it was over, it got shut down.
So you were ahead of your time, basically. Like it was too early for people to know what to do with it. Yeah, because I also had talked about, when I was at Symantec, I talked about, hey, we really should establish something that's kind of the equivalent of CMMI. Coming out of the government space, defense contracting, for anybody who's familiar with that, CMMI is a big deal. And it had a big push about 10 years ago. Like you couldn't bid on contracts unless you were CMMI 2 level certified or whatever. And I said, we should try to do that in the private sector with Intel. We had a whole discussion about it. Nobody ever did the work, myself included. And so it sounds like you did the work. You're just ahead of schedule, which makes me feel better that I didn't burn my time doing the work I kept, because I would have failed. And I saw the same thing when this came out not long ago. Brilliant people, good people, smart people. We know most of them, I'm sure. And I was like, this is great. I'm glad it's here. I'm not going to lie. I had a twinge of jealousy. Like, God damn it. I probably should have just done it years ago. Or how come you didn't invite me to be part of the cool kids group? But it doesn't matter. Like, I'm glad it's out there. I'm with you. The having that model matters, and should help us going forward. So I'm curious. These are some questions that you didn't know were coming, because I didn't know I was going to ask them until now. I did a little research. So if this throws you off, we'll edit shit out, I guess. But I'm looking through, so Forrester and Gartner are just the two I chose to pick on. And of course, the big four firms are out there. But so Gartner's annual revenue is over $6 billion. And Forrester's annual revenue is about $500 million, 450 million, give or take.
Yeah.
So you got the research that's out there doing what's doing it. As you said, this is independent, right? And you've got consulting type stuff, advisory, as you said, and that clearly generates some revenue. And there's also, listen, there is a pay for play component somewhere in this. Is there not, or is that totally wrong? I mean, I get the feeling there is, because I know, people have discussions about, paying to be in these quadrants, et cetera. But are they paying, how do I ask the question politely? Is it a rigged system where if you pay, you get where you want to be? Or is it just paying as part of the opportunity to work together, whatever? Do these organizations, the Forresters and Gartners at all, do they really get to continue to stay independent regardless of, their customers and their funding, and, are vendors able to put their thumb on the scale and say, hey, how about if I slide you some money, you move me up the chart a little bit?
So in short, no, it's not pay for play, right? SaaS vendors, technology vendors can be clients of any of these firms. And what they pay for and get is different than what a lot of enterprise customers get and ask for from a Forrester. I guess the thought from folks that are uninformed is that is the pay, and that gets them into a vendor evaluation, a wave or a magic quadrant. And that's just wrong. The research team has robust methodologies, a very strict integrity policy. I couldn't own stock in a company that was part of research. I actually did sell some stock that I owned when I arrived at Forrester, because that vendor was likely to be in my research at some point. And I proactively went out and sold that. Gift policy, like You can't accept a big screen TV or a trip to the Super Bowl from a vendor that's in your research. You can't do that stuff. So there's very strict integrity and research policies there that they all follow. And frankly, like the reputation of a Forrester or an individual analyst would go to crap if it was patently obvious that we're taking essentially bribes
Sure.
or some quid pro quo, to speak better of them
Mm.
in research.
So pay for play is
Um,
actually insulting. I mean,
yeah,
it's really insulting your integrity when
yeah,
people suggest it.
it is, and I feel that I have high integrity, and I was not going to compromise that at Forrester. And like I said, I sold some stock that could potentially have been a conflict of interest, and I jettisoned that
Hmm.
after I started there. It wasn't worth it. And if you look at the end of every at least Forrester report, Forrester Wave report, you'll see the qualities that got vendors into there, the inclusion criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always like Forrester client mindshare. So we look to the enterprise clients. What vendors are you interested in? We look at folks in the community. What are people talking about on social media when someone, mentions you on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and they say, "Hey, there's a new startup out there." You know, we, uh, we take some interest in that some of our audience is interested in a particular vendor.
Hmm.
Now, going back to my earlier response that vendors can be clients, but a client relationship does not matter when anyone wants to brief a Forrester analyst, at least. And
Mm.
the same should apply to any of the companies in there, that any vendor can go and brief the aligned analyst on their company, on what they do, what the value they provide for their customers and clients. That costs absolutely zero. Now it's up to the analyst to accept a vendor briefing. Some have very busy schedules. They may not have time. I try to fit these in when possible. Some technology vendors have these big analyst relations teams that
Mm-hmm.
hound you often. They're like, oh, we're on version 17.11 now. Can we brief
Ooh.
you on the updates in 17.11? And you're like, no, that's not enough. Like,
Tell me
I
when you're
don't,
on 18,
you know,
right?
like just send me an email about it. Right.
Right, right.
And it's up to the analyst to accept that vendor briefing or not.
Hmm.
And I mean, I loved hearing what like brand new startups, with just a seed round we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that typically have the brand new ideas. And I would keep my pulse on the industry by accepting a lot of the startup
Hmm.
briefings, because they were fascinating, and seeing what the new hotness may be out there. And sometimes like the ideas are just, way off in left field, but never did I even consider a client relationship to be a criteria for inclusion in
Hmm.
any of the vendor reports.
Yeah. Well, that's good to
Is it?
hear. I
Yeah.
mean, a couple of interesting things that stand out with it, I guess. Like, so a lot of the vendors, like, they want Gartner or Forrester or, all of these one, right? To recognize them, right? They want,
Hmm.
because there's an audience and it amplifies. So they're pitching you guys like, hey,
Hmm.
come listen to me, please. And you guys can, choose to or not. But I think that's really interesting. Also, in mentioning the revenues, listen, $450 million for Forrester, 6 billion for Gartner. Yeah, it actually, I think, lends credence to the idea. Listen, it's probably not pay for play because how much can I really influence a company that's already got 6 billion in revenue? Do they really care if I give them an extra 20 grand to be in the report? Probably not. I mean, I know the macro scale, but you also notice for anybody who's ever looked at these Forrester, the Forrester Wave or the Gartner Magic Quadrant, it doesn't have 612 vendors. It's not that big, right? So, like, you'd have to be paying an awful lot, I guess, to influence companies with that kind of revenue. So, and I, to be honest, had not thought about that until just now when I was looking at revenues, that it does blow a bit of an argument in. Now, I will ask you, and I won't ask you to name any names. Are the companies out there that look like these companies, but are just pay for play and just marketing, and they run their own little thing and it looks the same, but basically you just pay to get in there? I can say for a fact, by the way, for anybody wondering, there are awards like that for sure. Like, there's plenty of awards that you get pitched where it's like, how would you like to win this amazing cybersecurity award? It's just $1,500. You're like, well, that's not really an
Yeah.
award. That is it. I'm buying
There
a
are
trophy.
those.
Is
I've
that the
seen
same thing
those
for analysts?
emails. Back at our former employer,
Mm-hmm.
we saw those even on the
Sure.
enterprise side because they'll have like the 100 next CISOs, and
Mm-hmm.
my last job, the deputy CISO was on one of those lists of like future CISOs, and
Sure.
yeah, it's like pay a few bucks and get your name on there. There's basically
That's
no
right.
methodology. It's just a marketing thing,
Mm.
purely, and you know that's
So you got
definitely
to watch
not
out for those then,
Gartner,
I guess.
Forrester, IDC,
Yeah.
and vendors like that. That's not what Forrester does. Forrester runs global surveys that collect just oodles of data across tons of different tech spaces.
Mm.
So obviously there's a security one, there's marketing ones, there's general IT stuff, healthcare. They have a ton of different
Mm.
research specialties and robust surveys, with good, solid methodologies, good tools for analyzing the data. And if you, and then speaking about a wave or a vendor evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
that's like a 6-month process.
Yeah.
I can say that at Forrester, we interviewed and surveyed the vendor's customers. So we spoke to them directly,
Mm.
and we ask them deep questions, and we probe and we poke, and we try to find where the warts are in the product, and where all the good stuff is.
Mm.
And we don't just take the vendor word for it. We give them a questionnaire, and they're going to say, yeah, we're a 10 out of 10 on this
Of course.
thing, or
Of
5 out of
course.
5, whatever the scoring criteria is. But we validate as best we can with the resources we have,
Mm-hmm.
all the PR and marketing stuff that those vendors come with there. So we never take their word, for it. We
Mm.
validate everything that we possibly can, and we call shenanigans on stuff, and vendors will often complain, and there's a dispute process, and sometimes they will threaten to not be clients anymore.
Mm.
Okay, pound sand. We
Well,
don't
yeah.
need your
Yeah. Again, a half a
50,000,
billion
whatever it
dollars or
is.
$6 billion in revenue. I'm guessing
I
that
can
one
say that
client, isn't
Forrester
it?
wouldn't sacrifice their reputation just so that a vendor got, slightly more up and to the right. Like,
Right.
it's not
Mm.
how it happens there. Like,
Mm.
unless the vendor could prove that I used bad methodology, that maybe they could say that I didn't consider a particular feature of their
Mm-hmm.
product. If they
Mm-hmm.
could
Mm-hmm.
point to it and, say that I missed it. And if I did, okay, cool, my bad. We'll go and do it
Right.
again. If I didn't follow the methodology, sure. But if they just
Mm.
didn't like where they ended up, we never changed the score.
Mm.
Didn't matter what they said. Didn't matter if there were tears. I had vendor people actually
Tears.
cry. I
Uh,
mean, I think they thought they were going to get fired because they weren't
mm,
a leader, that they were like
mm,
I don't know, a challenger, or
right.
I forget the other category is actually. It's been a couple years, but
Yeah.
no, I mean, tears, emotion, you can yell at
Mm.
me all you want. It was not going to change your score.
Oh, it's true. I yell at Brian all the time. It's, you should meet his wife. She yells at him a lot too. It's all deserved, by the way. She's brilliant. So, but yeah, Brian's good at getting yelled at. It's the truth.
I can take it.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you have to sometimes, but I mean, this is actually really good, information about the industry, right? So, I mean, these are sort of the honest brokers of our business, right? And yeah, they make enough revenue. It sounds like that you can't really influence. And so, if you're looking to understand the environment or do some comp intel, or maybe you don't have your own comp intel and you're trying to figure out, I need a solution, but I don't know which one. It sounds like there's a real value in working with, some of these analyst organizations. So with that in mind, you've been on both sides. Like you work, we
Mhm.
talked about Forrester, quite a bit. You worked there, you worked in vendors, you've been on customer side. What recommendations do you have for building relationships with the analysts? I mean, whether it's a vendor who wants to get noticed, clearly bribes aren't the way to go. Whether it's somebody who's thinking about, changing their structure, their infrastructure, their security posture, and they're looking to work with some of these companies. Like, what kind of recommendations do you have? Having been on both sides, what's a good way to go about it?
So if you're a vendor, if you're a startup and you're entering, let's say, the threat intel space, right?
Sure.
Go find the analysts at the various firms that cover that area. It should be pretty easy to find. We're all public because the analysts are the product at the Gartners and Forresters and IDCs of the world. So all the Forrester folks have usually a pretty big profile on LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever social media they prefer. It's pretty easy to get in touch with them. They will preview research. They will talk about research on those forums. Often folks, like when I was there, I would do press interviews. I'd be quoted somewhere and all. So it's pretty easy to find the analysts that are in your particular technology space. So if you're a vendor, especially a small one, go and reach out to them. Just, like I said, you don't have to be a client to do a briefing, to show your company, introduce your company to a Forrester analyst, at least. No charge to do that. It's up to the analyst to decide if they have the time. And and some of that depends on their research calendar. So dovetail into that. If you're a vendor, you probably have data and you talk to customers too. You have some insights into the marketplace. Try to contribute, try to help that analyst do research, right? A lot of the bigger firms are going to have analyst relations managers, and usually they would check in about once a quarter with me and ask me, what's my research schedule like? And would often help connect me to someone that may have some data or some insights into the problem that I'm trying to address, which the problem usually came from some other client, where they said, hey, I'm having trouble with whatever it might be. It could be OT security, right? What do I do? What should be my strategy in OT security be, right? And just to kind of go full circle back to zero trust is I didn't get to it, but I wanted to write a paper called Zero Trust for Operational Technology, or ZT for OT. I ended up leaving to go work with AJ actually, and never got to that. But that engagement, is free. Anyone can connect with folks on LinkedIn, and they'll announce research. And if you've got a particular idea, go for it. If you're an individual contributor at some large enterprise and your leadership only listens to the Forresters, Gartners, and Deloittes and KPMGs and stuff of the world, and you're saying the same things, go talk to those analysts and tell them what you're seeing as a technician in these areas. If you're that programmer or that security operations person, that security architect, go and talk to these folks. I felt like I was a little bit of a proxy for some of my peers in the industry when I went to Forrester. Is I can take everything that they're seeing, everything they say to their leadership, and I can write it in research, and then it goes back to that CISO, and then they're like, oh wow, like I should do Intel that way. Cool, like let's do it that way. And it came from the brand, a Forrester or whoever, and but those ideas, like they come from somewhere. We talk, it may be informal. It may not be a formal research interview. I may not have a research assistant on the line taking notes, but you talk on Twitter and Signal, Slack, whatever it is with people, and you detect themes. People are complaining about maybe a particular feature or security control or usage of threat intelligence. And then we're pulling that out and we're looking through survey data and we're validating, or we're, refuting what folks are complaining about. They're like, that's not really a problem, or yours is an edge case or something. And, we take inputs from a ton of different places, to build these best practices reports to guide folks on what's the next thing in security. What's the thing that comes after zero trust?
Yeah, it's a good. We haven't gotten there yet, obviously, but we probably
should.
should.
And if you're in an enterprise too, if you're that individual contributor or a lower level manager, you probably only have a couple contacts for some of the bigger firms like a Forrester. Go and find out who that POC is, and then use that person to get some inquiry time. So an inquiry with at least a Forrester analyst is like a 30 to 45-minute conversation about existing research. So I wrote a report, for example, on how to hire your first director of threat intelligence. So maybe you're hiring, maybe you're the CISO hiring that director of threat intelligence, and you want to bounce a candidate, a profile, like a resume off of someone like me when I was there. You could schedule an inquiry about existing research and answer some questions and go deeper. For all those best practices reports and waves and everything, there's always research. There's always notes that were left on the editing room floor. Forrester writes really sharp, concise reports, really digestible, which means that we often do cut out a lot of insights, a lot of data that we discovered during the research process. So go and ask, to go deeper and have those conversations with them. There's always more inside. There's so much information inside some of these analyst brains. Most come from industry. They were sales engineers. They were threat intel analysts like me. They were network architects. They were programmers, developers there. Most come in having done a lot of the job that their clients are doing. And they've been in their shoes. They felt the pain. They have empathy, and they have so much knowledge. And sometimes it's like based on their own experience at another company before Forrester or before a Gartner. So find out who your contact is at your enterprise, and see about scheduling inquiries. A lot of inquiry privileges just don't even get used, which is sad. We want to talk. We want to have the conversations. That's why we joined the company, to do research and then to turn that into something that helps technology leaders be more efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the other vendor uses there too is find out if you've even got a product market fit. You may have this crazy idea, right? And so use that briefing as an opportunity to get, a response. A briefing, it's all about the vendor talking to the analyst, but, there's always questions and you can pick up on themes. And, if I ask about a particular feature or product, quality or whatever, and I keep asking about that one thing, that's probably an indicator of something like maybe I'm not buying what you're selling because I know my enterprise clients don't care about that, right? Before getting really far into a product life cycle, before, when you've just got an alpha or a beta or something, before you're getting really to an MVP, go brief an analyst and get the reaction. That can tell you a lot. It's almost free inquiry, just a way someone like I would respond to a new product or service offering from a vendor. I'm not going to tell you.
Sorry to interrupt on this one, but is there a trick? So on the one hand, there's 850 million vendors out there, right? So I'm sure none of these analysts want the 12 people who listen to this show to tell everybody to go ahead and flood them with things. So is there a way to stand out? If you're going to reach out to, somebody at Forrester or Gartner or whatever and say, hey, listen, I want an opportunity to chat with you. I want to brief you on, what we're up to, et cetera. What is the right way? What is an effective way? How do you stand out? Yeah. How do you make it so it's worth their time, right? As opposed to just being one of this horde that's like, please, see my stuff so you can amplify me. Is there a trick to it? Is there a better way to do it? Is it,
saying, hey, we're a new threat intelligence vendor is not going to be enough, right?
Right.
I've got a ton of time, or I don't have a ton of time, and that's not going to really interest me. But if you tell me that, hey, we are extracting signals across the internet that detect malware, earlier, before ransomware is deployed or something like that. Now you've got some interest. Like if you've got to be able to distill down the value that your product or service provides in one bullet, right? And you can't do that. I don't think you are really that mature yet. And then the other thing is when I do get the vendor briefing, typically one of the questions, and this I learned this there at Forrester, was to see how mature that vendor is ask them, when you win or lose a competitive deal, why do you lose to competitors? Why do you beat your competitors? That shows that they are extracting some insights from their own customer and prospect base. And that's hugely, that's important. They should know that, right? And then that also does help the analysts understand if there is product market fit, and if this is a vendor that maybe should be in research someday.
Hmm.
And fairly easy questions that should be easy questions to answer, short questions, that you can ask any vendor, and we would typically ask that like to any new vendor out there, to see if they understand their customers and prospects.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is, if I want to get the attention of somebody, if I've got a new product and service, what I need to do, because it's got to be quick and effective, is just tell them that we're cutting edge, new wave technologies, utilizing AI in unforeseen ways to secure all networks proactively for 100% protection using blockchain technology. Like that. That's really enough, right? That'll get me in the door. And zero trust. I got to throw that in someplace. I know. Less than zero.
Yeah,
Now,
definitely zero
less than
trust when
zero
you're talking
trust.
to
Is there somebody out there
Forrester.
writing that right now? The less than zero trust, like
But I mean, that
absolute zero.
your example there, while hilarious, I mean that's like all marketing basically. Like,
Yes, of
don't tell
course.
me it's AI and it's blockchain, whatever
Yep.
there. What's
Yep.
the actual value that it brings? What does it do that's better than legacy products and services?
Hmm. So if I just
It
said, hey, we've developed a new technology and capability that is faster, more effective, less noise. We can prove it to you with the data and statistics, and it's faster, cheaper, better, that kind of a thing. That's more likely to get a
Yeah,
response
yeah,
than just throwing all the marketing jargon
definitely.
out there.
Marketing buzzwords don't work very well on folks like me.
Yeah. Well, that's probably good advice for folks out there, because a lot of these are tied to the marketing organizations. And no offense to marketing. Listen, I've talked a little about it. It was a show a few episodes back that was, it's all security marketing bullshit. If you didn't see it, shame on you for not watching it, everybody. It was a good friend of both of ours, actually. Emily Phelps, that was the guest on that one.
I introduced
Um,
the two of them.
yes, you did. Yeah. Now she and I are really good friends. Brian and I talk occasionally. But anyway, no, but I think that's important, right? Hey, listen, marketing is a lot of times the front end of this. Make sure that you're working with practitioners or product people if you're building something, right? To get the real answer, like the value piece. I think that's important. And marketing knows value too, right? So instead of using the buzzword, skip to, hey, the value prop. That sounds like
Yeah.
the better way to
Yeah,
get noticed
and
and get an
additionally
opportunity.
for B2B folks, like, don't market to your own executives, right? You got to market to the buyers. Like, your executives know if there's some AI or ML or whatever that's in the product, right?
Yes.
And the buyers don't really care as long as it provides value, as long as it solves the problem that they're having there. So focus on the
Mhm.
problem and the value, and get rid of the buzzwords.
I got good advice. Frankly, that's probably, we buried the lead. That's probably the best part of the whole show, is, hey, how do we make this work for us? And the answer is, skip the buzzwords and just focus on value, which makes sense. We all talk about that, right? People just want return on investment. They want value, you know, tell them to them, get the attention of these analysts, and then prove it to them, show it to them, give them a demo, et cetera. And if you can do that, you'll probably get a good write-up, and then you'll draw business, and you can be super rich and famous, like, I don't know, somebody. So, all right, this is really cool, man. And listen, we're coming up on time. We're getting a little short here, but which is fine. This has been a good conversation. I think it's really interesting. Like, it's not all pay for play. In fact, these companies make enough money that you probably just can't bribe your way into their charts. So we can actually probably have some reason to trust and believe. It's nice to know that there's processes behind the scenes on this stuff, and documented processes, and legitimate research processes, like you would expect from people who are professionals in our industry, whether Intel professionals or academics, or a bit of both. I mean, again, Brian went to the prestigious Georgia Tech University, and
Ooh,
others
ooh, ooh! It
went
is,
to other schools, I'm
man.
sure.
You just did a faux pas there, man.
You're not prestigious Georgia Tech University?
We are. It's the Georgia Institute
Oh,
of
Georgia Institute of
Technology.
Technology. Right. I forgot. It's not
You
technical.
watch
Yeah,
enough college
Georgia.
football, you should know it's always that trivia question. We're like the 4
Yes.
schools that don't have university
And yet
in
you don't
their
go by
in their
GIT,
title.
though. Well, you don't go by GIT. You just go by
No, you
Georgia
don't.
Tech. So, but I guess Caltech doesn't either, and they're probably the same way. So, anyway, no, it's a good point, right? So, go to universities, good legitimate research, not really bribable, not pay for play. There are some others out there that are actually going to watch for that. And the best way to really get engaged and get involved is to go out there and do it. So, if you're a vendor and you want to pitch, use your value prop, not your marketing shit. And if you're somebody looking for help figuring out how to navigate the industry and get better, these are people that actually are looking for those conversations. So I think that's actually really good. I think this is
And,
exactly
a
what we were
lot
hoping
of
to cover.
folks will say
Mhm.
that I'm in a particular Slack group, a Signal group, a text
Yeah.
group, email chain, whatever, with other CISOs or different security leaders, IT leaders there. And I just ask them what they think about a particular vendor, or what I think about zero trust. And that's good. Keep doing that. I'm not saying don't do that, but a Forrester has just a bigger aperture, a global aperture. You know, their survey goes globally to the point where you can get specific insights by region. So if you're a vendor and you're looking to sell in APAC, you're going to have some different buyer attitudes over there than you might have in North America. That's the global scale of like a Forrester. That survey data is huge, and you can bisect it and break it all up and get some really neat insights by region and industry. And if you're a CISO, you probably know very similar CISOs, and you don't necessarily know, their experience is going to be very different than other folks elsewhere. And so use it to complement each other there. Oh, another thing that I wanted to mention is with a Forrester Wave, especially, and this probably is similar to the other vendor evaluations, is the end research is not simply the graphic, right?
Right.
That's what gets shared on social and whatever. It's not even just the full PDF that has some of the breakdowns and scores there. But at Forrester, there's a tool that clients get that is customizable. So I'll use Threat Intel as an example. If you are great in technical, tactical threat intelligence, maybe you don't need that. Maybe your gap is strategic. And so you can use that tool, change the weightings, say drop technical, tactical down to 0, tune strategic up to 100. And it replots all the vendors out there, and you get a new set of leaders. And then you can use that, like I said, to make better decisions on your technology procurement there. So it's not just that particular image. There's way more to it. And of course, if you need help navigating that tool and that report and all, that's where the inquiry comes in with talking to the analyst, to go deeper than maybe what the Wave report talked about there.
Yeah. That's actually really interesting. I didn't know that. And so you can customize it and tune it further.
Yep.
This is turning into a really good advertisement for Forrester. By the way, those guys should probably be sponsoring the show. I'm going to reach out to them and tell them I'm not putting this thing out until they actually put some money on this thing. Damn it. No, they don't care about me. And obviously I can't bully them because they make $500 million a year. But it's good to know that I didn't know you could actually tune the tool, because that is a good point. Like, it's a segmentation piece, right? You might say I'm good at this, but not that. And Intel's a perfect example in that you might have great strat and lousy tac and operational, or vice versa. And to be able to tune it and go, that's important, because maybe I'm great at tactical. Well, the number one group, according to the Wave, or Magic Quadrant or whatever, I shouldn't just assume that's the one, because maybe if I tune it, I find out, well, they're great at tactical and they're lousy at strategic. Well, why the hell would I buy more tactical? Now the group that was actually down the Wave, it turns out for strategic, though, they're great. Well, that's the group I should be looking at. So that's actually a really good tip for those who are working with these organizations or thinking about it, that there's more than what we see publicly, I guess.
Yep.
So listen, we're coming down to it. The name of the show, like, you don't get a pass. Nobody ever has yet. Don't be a coward. The name of the show is Unspoken Security, right? So the closing question is always the same. With that in mind, tell me something you've never told anyone, something unspoken.
I mean, I never take risks. I'm very conservative, by the book, never push boundaries or anything. I mean,
Sure.
I've got nothing really. I don't have any skeletons in my closet, right?
Do you want?
I don't
me to
think
start
I've
telling
ever said
stories?
that, by the way. That was, but no.
I'll get Emily here to tell stories. I'll get them full right now. I'll get some stories.
Oh yeah. Emily's got some stories. And one thing that she probably wouldn't even know, I mentioned, Fort Gordon, now Fort Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Between reserve and active time, I pretty much commuted between Atlanta and Fort Gordon throughout 20 years of service. And anyone that's from this area knows Interstate 20 is pretty boring. Lots of pine trees. And I kind of got in the habit of testing my vehicle at the time. So a lot of times I was driving like really early morning, so I could make PT at like 6, 7, whatever it was a.m. And so every car I owned during that 20 years, I validated the vehicle's top speed, including a Jeep Wrangler, which is like driving a billboard. So I think I'm not even sure I hit 100 miles an hour there, but my current car, which I've had for 12 years now, I did validate the electronic governor does cut off at 155.
Ooh, geez.
Yep.
All right.
But you get in some of those stretches there, and you can see for miles, and there's no taillights there, and
Man. Anybody from the Georgia State Patrol that might be listening to this? Sounds like I-20 is a place to hang out and wait for Brian Kime to come by. look up his vehicle and plate. I don't have that available to you, but you beat me. I've done 140 a couple of times. I haven't done 155 though. I think 140 is my top, and I don't recommend it for those who are asking. I mean, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I don't recommend it because it wasn't fun. It's just I'm not going to be responsible for bad things happening to people. I'm actually going to share one. I don't usually do this as the host anymore, but because people know things. But I got a funny one because it's about you, so I'll get to do it. So Brian mentioned that he when he left Forrester, he came to work with me, which is true. We worked together. We both were hired roughly almost the same time. I was hired right before him, basically. We both had interviewed around the same time we were hired together, and we had peer roles in the company. And not long after we were hired, there was a holiday party because that's just the time of the year, right? And so we're all sitting, nice party, and it's a fancy get together and whatever. And I get to meet Brian's wonderful wife, who obviously has terrible taste in men. And we're around this table, and it's a really nice event, right? And Brian was very happy to have joined the company, and maybe had one or two drinks or more. And so our CEO was standing up. We were talking about the year in review, and to be honest with you, it was a few people were kind of kissing the ring of the CEO. That was kind of how the vibe was in the room. And and Brian stands up and kindly says, I'm so thankful to be here. I really appreciate you hiring me. And then spends the next 2 minutes or so raving about me. And it was very kind, but also very embarrassing. I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude, you're going to get me fired. You're shutting up the boss. This is his moment. You're supposed to be kissing his ring, and suddenly it's me. And listen, Brian's a really nice guy, and it was genuine, and he was very happy to be there. And we were lucky to work together, and we had some good times. But if Brian has one too many, I promise you will get all sorts of sweet honesty from him. I just thought Brian likes me, or it would have been just a terrible, terrible night for me, because he had no problem saying what was on his mind. It was a lot of fun. It was very sweet. It was kind. It was a little embarrassing for me, but it's one of the funnier things I can actually remember in my career, because I sat there thinking, dude, I don't know this guy that well yet. Like, you might have gotten me fired. You just showed up the CEO, and I'm going to look like the jackass somehow.
Hey, you were there longer than me, so you're welcome.
That's true. Yeah, like days. But no, it was good. And I appreciate it. And we had a good time working together. And it's a shame it doesn't happen anymore. And maybe somewhere in the future, we'll get another chance to do so. I think you should do the ZT for OT thing. You got some time around. I think you should sit down and write. I'm serious. You should sit down and write the paper, like publish it, do it. But listen, so you got to share your little story about, driving 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I got to embarrass you, which is fun. We're kind of under time, but the last thing, after that is just, is there anything that you want to add as we come up on time? Any last thoughts? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say before we call it a show and hop out of here?
I'll make a plug for myself, really. I don't often do that. I like to, say good things about people like AJ, right? But, I'm on the job market too. So I'm looking for threat intelligence leadership positions, vendor or enterprise. So if you know something in the Atlanta area or remote, hit me up on socials and, let me know.
Yeah. And listen, I think you should hire Brian. Like, if you guys are listening and you have that, I've worked with him. He's a good guy. His resume is fucking amazing. Obviously, you can read it, and we talked about it. And he went to the Georgia Institute of Technology, where he got his architecture degree, but also the military background. But the truth of the matter is, the guy's a good guy to work with. Like, I trust him. He's reliable. He's a good person. He's easy to work with. I'd work with you in a heartbeat, Brian. If I had the opportunity to do so, if I could hire you, I would. But I have like $3 and a ham sandwich a week if you're interested in that job. Otherwise, I recommend you hold out for something a little bit more. But no, I think it's good. Yeah, plugging yourself's the best way to go in this place. Hopefully, by the time anybody other than the two of us sees this, you might already have a new gig. But if not, yeah, I highly recommend. Brian's a good guy to work with, to build teams, to build organizational structure, to do intel stuff. He's a good one. So, all right, listen, man, with that, thanks for being here, and thanks for the topic. This was 100% Brian's idea to talk about, analysts. I think it's great because I wouldn't have thought of it, and we don't do enough of this stuff. And hopefully it helped. Frankly, I learned a few things about it. It's not all pay for play, and there's value in this. And now we know how to work with these guys and maybe pilfer some good talent from them eventually. So thanks again for being on the show, man. I appreciate it. Have good luck with the search, et cetera. We'll keep talking offline, obviously. And for everybody else listening and watching, thanks for spending some time with us today. If you like the show, I appreciate it if you can, like it and recommend it to people, subscribe, all that stuff. If you don't like the show, shut the hell up. No, that's not true. If you don't like it, please do tell me. Like, I'd prefer you don't tell the world, but please do reach out and let me know if you got ideas to improve it. If you know people you think should be on the show, I'm open to ideas. But again, thanks for taking the time to listen and watch today. And until next time, this has been another episode of Unspoken Security.
That's a wrap for this episode of Unspoken Security. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.